The boys tell me there's a new bike out in the shed. 8-valve engine, big V-twin, and that means a whole heap of fun. So let's go and see what we got and go for a ride. So what have we got out here? Oh, that's an MT10. Well, they're a lot of fun, but they're not exactly a V-twin. What have we got here? A Harley? Well, that's a Road King with the new Milwaukee-Eight engine. And that's an 8-valve motor, and that's a whole heap of torque. That should be a whole heap of fun, but in a little bit of a different way to what I was thinking. So here we have it. This engine does have 8 valves. It is a 4-valve per cylinder motor. It's the new Milwaukee-Eight. It's the first time Harley's done this, built an all-new engine with 4 valves per cylinder. So why did Harley build a new motor for the touring machines, and why in particular did they put them in the Road King and things like that? Well, I think it was in answer to Indian. The Thunderstroke 111 motor across the big bore Indian line is a modern engine. It looks like an old one, but it's not. It's a modern engine, produces a lot of torque, and it's a really nice engine. And I think Harley's actually one-upped Indian on this. They've obviously looked at what they've got there, and they've gone one better. This new Milwaukee-Eight engine is a really, really sweet motor. It's only 107 cubes, so it's just slightly smaller than the Indian motor, but it produces a lot of torque, and it's a really nice engine, especially on the highway. It just throbs along really, really well. Produces more torque than the old motors, and that makes the engine nicer to use for overtaking. And yet it's still very much a Harley. Although there's a balance shaft there, it still vibrates a bit, it still shakes, but not annoyingly. It's a really nice ride. And that makes this bike a lot of fun for those longer rides. Of all the Harley touring bikes, this one has the least amount of weather protection. It's only got the 2 bags on the back. So the Road King is aimed at people who want a bagger, but they want that touring chassis with the twin shocks. Gives you a lot more cornering clearance and a nicer long wheelbase ride than things like the Softail. In Australia, you can only buy it with the ABS. It's an option in some markets, but in Australia you can only get it that way. And it also comes with the reflex linked brakes. Some people really don't like those reflex linked brakes. They really want to have independent control over the front and rear. I found it fine. I mean, I'm not one to ride a machine like this as though it were a sports bike and try and stuff it into corners and really want to be able to maintain separation of the brakes. I just find that I use the rear brake first just to settle it down a little bit just before you put the front brake on, and then it'll slow the bike quite well. There's twin discs up the front, there's a big disc on the rear, and the rear does do a lot of work with the way the weight bias is set up on this machine. But if I was going to have a criticism of the bike, the braking performance is only average. But that's partly because you're trying to stop a machine that's very heavy. It's 370 odd kilograms ready to roll. And that's fine when you're moving. It's not really a problem once you're above walking pace. But under walking pace, pushing it around, and especially going backwards if you're maneuvering, it's a very big and heavy motorcycle, and you really need to know that. Now, the engine cases and the way the design is with this new engine means it's actually easier to get your feet on the ground than some of the earlier ones, which makes life a little bit easier. So if you're starting to struggle with your old Road King, maybe a new one will solve that problem for you. This is the bagger of the Harley's touring range. You can take this screen off in a matter of seconds and turn it into a bagger. In fact, you can take the bags off in a matter of seconds and just turn it into a classic looking touring sort of motorcycle. And from here you can go up to the Street Glide with its handlebar mounted fairings, the Road Glide with the frame mounted fairing, and the Ultra with the big top box. That's the full dresser. So this, if you like, is the base model. of Harley's touring range. But I tell you what, it's a lot of fun if you're only into sort of weekend touring, because these bags will carry enough to get away with it for the weekend. The screen gives you enough weather protection for a lot of rides in a lot of different weather conditions. And the bike is very, very smooth and nice to ride for a few days at a time. So the Road King offers the traditional Harley-Davidson styling. Doesn't get much more traditional than this, with the touring chassis and style and design and a decent sized fuel tank and luggage capacity. And I think that makes it a fairly unique machine in the Harley-Davidson lineup. It still looks really good and it still looks really traditional, but it's actually a lot more capable than you think. It's got more cornering clearance than the Softails. It's got more comfort and touring range than just about anything apart from those other touring bikes. It doesn't cost as much as an Ultra, and it still does look $1 million. Add in the little extras like the improved rear suspension, and I think that makes it a fairly unique machine in the Harley-Davidson lineup. It still looks really good and it still looks really traditional, but it's actually a lot more capable than you think. It's got more cornering clearance than the Softails. It's got more comfort and touring range than just about anything apart from those other touring bikes. It doesn't cost as much as an Ultra, and it still does look $1 million. And it's the best Road King they've ever produced with the new Milwaukee-Eight engine. So if you're in the market for a touring bike, one that's not as serious a tourer as the full dressers, but it's still going to be a great bike for weekend rides, go and take a test ride on the new Road King. I think you'll be impressed.